My son didn't scream when the officer's hand clamped around his throat. He just made this small, confused, wheezing sound, his eyes wide and terrified, flapping his hands against the heavy tactical vest. That sound, that silence, broke something inside me that 20 years of combat never did. I didn't run. I didn't shout. I just started walking toward them, and the world went quiet. CTA hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. Story. The park was supposed to be our safe space. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, the kind of golden hour that usually makes everything look peaceful. I had just turned my back for 10 seconds to throw away a coffee cup. That was my mistake. In my line of work, 10 seconds is a lifetime. 10 seconds is the difference between a successful extraction and a flag-draped coffin. Evan, I called out, turning around. Evan is 14, but his mind works differently. He sees the world in patterns and colors that I will never understand. He loves shiny things. He loves badges. He must have seen the reflection on the officer's chest and just wanted to touch it. What I saw next stopped my heart. Officer Victor. I saw the nameplate later, had Evan pinned against a chain-link fence. The man was huge, easily 6'2", but he was using his forearm to crush the windpipe of a boy who weighs 100 pounds soaking wet. Stop resisting. Stop resisting. Victor was screaming, his face red, spit flying. Evan wasn't resisting. He was freezing. It's what he does when he's overwhelmed. His arms were pinned to his sides, his fingers twitching in that rhythm he does when his brain overloads. He was suffocating. I crossed the 40 yards between us in 4 seconds. I didn't tackle the cop. That's what an amateur does. That gets you shot. I stopped 3 feet away, my hands visible, my voice dropping to that low, flat register I used when training recruits on the grinder. Officer, release the boy. It wasn't a request. Victor's head snapped toward me. His eyes were wild, dilated. He looked like he was high on adrenaline or something else. Back off. This suspect assaulted an officer. He is autistic, I said, taking one slow step forward. And he is turning blue. If he loses consciousness, you and I are going to have a very different conversation. Maybe it was the lack of fear in my voice. Maybe it was the way I stood, balanced, ready to move. Victor blinked, the haze clearing for a second. He looked down at Evan, who was gasping for air, tears streaming silently down his cheeks. Victor shoved Evan away like he was garbage. Evan stumbled and fell into the dirt, coughing, clutching his throat. I was on my knees beside him instantly. Breathe, buddy. In and out. Look at me. Evan looked at me, his eyes darting around. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. He was terrified. You need to control your animal, Victor spat, adjusting his belt. He had his hand resting on his holster. He grabbed for my weapon. I stood up slowly. I helped Evan to his feet and positioned him behind me. He likes shiny things, I said, staring at the officer's badge. He didn't grab your weapon. He reached for your badge, and you choked a disabled minor for it. Watch your mouth. Victor stepped into my personal space. He was trying to intimidate me. He was puffing his chest out, using his size. I've been in rooms with warlords and cartels. A corrupt small-town cop with an ego problem didn't register on my fear scale. I looked him dead in the eye. Badge number 492. I memorized it aloud. Officer Victor, I suggest you get back in your vehicle. Or what? He sneered. You gonna do something, old man? Hunter. The voice came from the parking lot. It was my wife, Tessa. She came running across the grass in her heels. I felt a wave of relief. She would help me calm Evan down. She would be furious. She was a mother, after all. But when she reached us, she didn't look at Evan. She looked at Victor. Oh my goodness, Tessa breathed, looking at the officer's uniform. Is everything okay? I am so sorry. I frowned. Tessa, he choked Evan. Tessa spun on me, her eyes flashing with annoyance. Hunter, stop it. I saw Evan running up to him. You know how Evan gets. He probably scared the officer. I stared at her. The world tilted on its axis. He has bruises on his neck, Tessa. She waved a hand dismissively, turning back to Victor with a smile that was a little too apologetic, a little too warm. I am so sorry, officer. My husband is overprotective. He's retired military. Sometimes he doesn't know how to switch it off. Victor's posture relaxed. He smirked at me over Tessa's shoulder. I get it, ma'am. Hard to adjust to civilization. Exactly, Tessa laughed. A nervous, high-pitched laugh I hadn't heard in years. She reached out, and I couldn't believe it. She touched the officer's arm. Just a light brush on his bicep. Please, don't file a report. We'll take him home. It won't happen again. Victor looked down at her hand on his arm, then at me. The smirk deepened. Since you asked nicely. But keep a leash on the kid. He turned and walked back to his cruiser, swaggering. I stood there, my blood turning to ice. Evan was still wheezing behind me, gripping the back of my shirt. Let's go. Tessa hissed, her smile vanishing as she turned to me. You always have to make a scene, don't you? He hurt our son, I said quietly. Evan is fine, she snapped, walking toward the car without even checking on the boy. You're going to get us in trouble with the city. Just get in the car, Hunter. I watched her walk away. I watched the patrol car pull out slowly, the officer watching me in his rearview mirror. Something was wrong. Tessa hated confrontation. She usually panicked when Evan had a meltdown. But she hadn't panicked. She had smoothed it over. She had touched his arm. And she had blamed me. I looked down at Evan. There were red finger marks blooming on his pale neck. I'm sorry, Dad. Evan whispered, his voice raspy. I knelt down and pulled him into a hug, staring at the retreating taillights of Officer Victor's car. It's not your fault, buddy. I whispered into his hair. It is not your fault. But as I held him, my mind wasn't on comfort. It was switching gears. It was flipping switches I hadn't touched in 5 years. I wasn't just a dad anymore. I was an instructor. I was a hunter. And I had just identified a threat. But I had no idea that the threat wasn't just the man in the uniform. The real threat was sitting in the passenger seat of my own car, waiting for me to drive her home. The drive home was suffocating. Silence usually feels heavy, but this silence felt sharp, like walking through a room filled with tripwires. Evan was in the back seat, his knees pulled up to his chest, rocking slightly. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, checking his neck. The red marks were turning a darker shade of purple, shaping into the distinct outline of a thumb and fingers. When we pulled into the driveway, Tessa was out of the car before I even cut the engine. She didn't wait for us. She stormed into the house, her heels clicking angrily against the pavement. I unbuckled Evan. Come on, buddy. Let's get some ice on that. He didn't speak. He hadn't spoken a single word since he apologized in the park. He just nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor mats. Inside the kitchen, the atmosphere was toxic. Tessa was leaning against the counter, her arms crossed tight across her chest. She had poured herself a glass of wine, a large one. It was barely 5 p.m. You need to calm down, she said the moment I walked in with Evan. She wasn't asking, she was commanding. I guided Evan to the dining chair and went to the freezer. I am calm, Tessa. I'm getting ice for our son because a police officer tried to crush his windpipe. He didn't try to crush anything. Tessa's voice went up an octave. She slammed her hand on the marble counter. God, Hunter, you always have to make everything so dramatic. It's the PTSD, isn't it? You see a threat where there isn't one. I stopped. I held the bag of frozen peas in my hand, the cold seeping into my skin. This was an old argument. Whenever I noticed something she didn't want me to notice, she played the damaged soldier card. I walked over to Evan and gently placed the ice pack on his neck. He flinched, then leaned into my hand. Look at this, Tessa, I said, my voice dangerously low. I pointed to the bruising. Is this my PTSD? Did my imagination put finger marks on his throat? Tessa glanced at Evan, but her eyes didn't stay there. She looked away, out the window. He was struggling, Hunter. The officer was just trying to restrain him. If you hadn't charged at him like a maniac, maybe the guy wouldn't have been so on edge. You escalated it. I stared at her. My wife. The woman I had been married to for 12 years. She was rewriting history in real time. I escalated it. I repeated, incredulous. He was choking him before I even moved. You're lucky he didn't arrest you, she snapped, taking a long drink of wine. Officer Victor. He seemed reasonable. He let us go? You should be grateful instead of acting like you're on a mission. Officer Victor. She used his first name. Not the officer. Not that cop. Officer Victor. A small, cold knot formed in my stomach. Go upstairs, Evan, I said softly. Take the ice. Play some video games. Put your headphones on. Evan slid off the chair and vanished upstairs like a ghost. Once he was gone, I turned fully to Tessa. How did you know his name? She froze. Just for a microsecond. The glass paused halfway to her mouth. What? You called him Officer Victor. I didn't introduce you. He didn't introduce himself. I saw his nameplate, but you were 30 yards away when you ran up. How did you know his name? Tessa blinked, then let out a scoffing laugh. She shook her head, rolling her eyes. You are paranoid. I must have heard you say it. Or maybe he said it. I don't know, Hunter. Who cares? The point is, you need to let this go. Do not go down to the station. Do not file a complaint. We have to live in this town. She turned her back to me and started rummaging through her purse. Her phone lit up on the counter. She snatched it up quickly, too quickly. I'm going to take a shower, she muttered, clutching the phone against her chest like a shield. Don't do anything stupid. She left the room, but the air she left behind tasted like lies. I waited until I heard the shower running upstairs. Then I grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to let this go. The police station was a brick fortress in the center of town. It looked clean, respectable. American flags, polished floors, photos of community outreach programs on the walls. It was designed to make you feel safe. But as I walked in, I felt that same prickling on the back of my neck that I used to get in Kandahar before an ambush. The desk sergeant was a guy named Kyle. I knew him vaguely from the gym. He was younger, maybe late 20s, with a thick neck and eyes that looked bored. Help you? Kyle asked, not looking up from his computer. I want to file a formal complaint against an officer, I said. Use of excessive force against a minor. Kyle stopped typing. The clicking of the keyboard ceased, and the silence in the lobby seemed to stretch. He looked up slowly. The boredom was gone, replaced by a guarded, flat stare. Name? Mine is Hunter. The officer's name is Victor. Badge number 492. Kyle didn't reach for a form. He didn't pick up a pen. He just leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. A subtle smirk played on his lips. Victor, huh? Kyle said, dragging the name out. And what exactly did Victor do? He choked my 14-year-old autistic son at Memorial Park less than an hour ago. I have witnesses, and I have photos of the bruising. I expected him to ask for the photos. I expected procedure. Instead, Kyle chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. Look, Mr. Hunter, Kyle said, dropping the formality. Victor is a decorated officer. He runs our tactical unit. If he restrained your kid, he had a reason. We don't just hand out complaint forms because parents get their feelings hurt. My son's feelings weren't hurt, I said, leaning over the counter. His trachea was compressed. That is assault. That is police work, Kyle shot back, his voice hardening. Now, you can turn around and walk out that door, or I can look up your file. I'm sure a guy like you. Retired SEAL, right? I bet you have a few things in your past we could look at. Maybe check if you're stable enough to have firearms in the house. It was a threat. A direct, blatant threat. I looked at Kyle. Really looked at him. I saw the arrogance. The absolute certainty that he was untouchable. He wasn't protecting a colleague. He was protecting a boss. Victor wasn't just a patrol cop. Is that how it works here? I asked softly. You threaten the victim. We protect our own, Kyle said simply. Go home, soldier. Before you start a war you can't win. I stared at him for 3 long seconds. In my mind, I saw 12 different ways to pull him over that counter. But that's what they wanted. They wanted the violent veteran. They wanted a reason to put me in cuffs. I slowly backed away, keeping my eyes on him. I'm going home, I said. Carl smirked and picked up the phone the second I turned my back. He wasn't calling his wife. He was calling Victor. I walked out into the cool evening air, feeling a cold rage settling into my bones. It wasn't the hot anger of a fight. It was the cold, calculating focus of a mission. I got back in my truck, but I didn't start the engine immediately. I sat there in the dark parking lot, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Tessa had known his name. Tessa had told me not to come here. Carl had threatened my gun license, something only someone close to me would know I was worried about losing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Tessa. Where are you? Dinner is ready. Please tell me you didn't go to the station. I looked at the message. It wasn't concern. It was panic. I started the truck and pulled out onto the main road. I drove past the park where it happened. It was empty now, shadows stretching across the grass. I wasn't just fighting a corrupt cop anymore. I was fighting the city. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if the person sleeping in my bed was on my side. I needed eyes. I needed to see what was happening when I wasn't looking. When I got home, Tessa was acting normal. Too normal. She was plating pasta, humming a song. She kissed my cheek when I walked in, smelling like expensive soap and wine. Did you listen to me? She asked lightly, handing me a plate. Yeah, I lied. I just went for a drive. To cool off. Her shoulders dropped. She relaxed. Good. That's good, Hunter. We just need to move on. Move on, I repeated. I ate dinner in silence. But later that night, while Tessa was asleep, breathing softly beside me, I didn't sleep. I got up, moving silently through the dark house. I went to the garage, to the locked tool chest in the back where I kept the gear I promised her I'd never use again. I took out a small black box. Hidden cameras. High definition, audio enabled, motion activated. If they wanted to gaslight me, fine. But I was going to turn on the lights. The installation took less than an hour. I moved through my own house like a ghost, a skill that hadn't faded with retirement. I placed one camera in the living room vent, another above the kitchen cabinets, and a third, the most critical one, facing the driveway. They were invisible to the untrained eye. Tessa slept through it all. When I slid back into bed, she rolled over, her hand resting heavily on my chest. In the past, that touch would have grounded me. Now it felt like a shackle. The next morning, the air in the house was brittle. I left for work early. I run a private security consultation firm. But today, I didn't go to the office. I drove a mile down the road, parked behind an old grocery store, and pulled out my laptop. I synced the feed. For 3 hours, nothing happened. Then, at 10:15 a.m., the motion sensor on the driveway pinged. A black Dodge Charger pulled in. It wasn't marked, but I knew the model. Officer Victor stepped out, wearing jeans and a tight t-shirt, looking like he owned the place. He walked to the front door with a confident stride. I switched to the living room camera. Tessa opened the door. She was wearing a silk robe, hair done, makeup perfect. She didn't look surprised. She stepped back, and Victor walked in, locking the door behind him. Then, he reached out and pulled my wife into a kiss that made my stomach turn over. It wasn't hesitant. It was familiar, possessive. She melted into it, wrapping her arms around his neck. I sat in my truck, staring at the screen, forgetting to breathe. The betrayal hit me physically, like a punch to the gut. They separated, breathless. Is he gone? Victor asked. He left at 7. Tessa smiled. We're safe. Good. Victor walked into my kitchen and opened my fridge like it was his own. He came to the station yesterday. Carl handled him, threatened his gun permit. Tessa froze. Oh God. If he loses his permit, he'll lose his mind. He's already unstable, Victor. He's not unstable, Tessa, Victor said, his voice dropping to a smooth, manipulative purr. He's dangerous. That's why we need to speed this up. I leaned closer to the screen. Speed what up? I can't just. Put him away, Tessa said, her face pale. He's Evan's father. He's a ticking time bomb, Victor countered, putting his hands on her shoulders. I filed a report this morning. Assault on an officer. Child endangerment. I noted that the kid was bruised because the father was dragging him away aggressively. I slammed my fist against the dashboard. The lie was so bold, so evil. He was pinning his crime on me. Will he go to jail? Tessa asked. She didn't sound horrified. She sounded calculating. Maybe, Victor shrugged. Or a psych ward. If we play the PTSD angle right. You get full custody. You get the house. You get the military pension. Tessa looked down. And the disability checks. Everything, Victor promised. And then, babe, you and I don't have to hide anymore. I run this town. With his money and my connections. We're set. Tessa looked up, a slow smile spreading across her face. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. I closed the laptop. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was conspiring to destroy me. She was going to let this corrupt cop frame me, lock me in a cage, and spend my retirement money while sleeping with the man who choked our son. The grief was there, sharp and agonizing. But underneath it, something else was waking up. I spent the rest of the day digging. I went to the public library 2 towns over, searching for Officer Victor on deep forums. I found whispers. Victor broke my brother's arm. Charges dropped. He owns Judge Oliver. Judge Oliver. The name kept popping up. The judge who signed off on every questionable warrant Victor requested. It was a ring. Victor was the muscle, Oliver was the shield, and my wife was the ticket to a payday. I drove home at 5 p.m. exactly. When I walked in, the house smelled of roast chicken. Tessa looked up and smiled. That same beautiful, lying smile. Hey, honey, how was work? Fine. I lied, my voice steady. A letter came for you, she said, pointing to the counter. I opened the thick envelope. Summons to appear. Charges, assault on a law enforcement officer. Child endangerment. The court date was fast-tracked for 3 days from now, signed by Judge Oliver. They were moving fast. What is it? Tessa asked, feigning concern. Victor filed charges, I said calmly. Oh no. She covered her mouth. Hunter, maybe you should just plead guilty. If you apologize, tell them you're having episodes. They'll go easy on you. She was reading from Victor's script. Admit to being broken. I looked at the woman I had promised to protect. The last ember of love turned to ash. I'm not pleading guilty, Tessa. I'm going to fight. You can't win against the police, she snapped. We'll see. I walked upstairs to Evan's room. He was organizing Legos. I sat next to him. Everything is going to be okay, buddy. I promise. I packed a small bag in the bedroom. Where are you going? Tessa asked from the doorway, panic flaring. Overnight security detail. I lied. I'll be back in the morning. It gave her time to call Victor. Perfect. I drove to a storage unit I rented years ago. Inside, under a dusty tarp, was a locker containing things I hadn't touched since I left the teams. Secure comms. Encrypted drives. A satellite phone. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Talk to me. A deep voice answered. Dominic, I said. It's Hunter. Code Black. There was a pause. Code Black meant family under threat. No rules. Where are you? Dominic asked, the playfulness gone. Home. But home isn't home anymore. I need the boys. I need the ghosts. Give me 6 hours, Dominic said. We're wheels up. I hung up and looked at the dark horizon. The legal system had failed. My marriage was a lie. So I wasn't going to use the law. I was going to use the only language men like Victor understood. Fear. The next morning, I walked into the office of the only criminal defense attorney in town who wasn't golfing buddies with the police chief. His name was Nathaniel, a disheveled man with coffee stains on his tie and a desk buried under files. He listened to my story without interrupting, rubbing his temples. When I mentioned Judge Oliver, he stopped rubbing and just looked at me with pity. Hunter, he said, closing the file folder I hadn't even fully opened yet. I can take your money. I can file the motions. But if Oliver is on the bench and Victor is the complainant, you aren't walking out of there with a win. There is video, I said. though I hadn't told him about the cameras I planted inside my own house yet. I was saving that. There are witnesses at the park. Witnesses get intimidated, Nathaniel said flatly. And Judge Oliver excludes evidence he doesn't like. It happens every month. They will paint you as a volatile, combat-stressed veteran who snapped. They have the narrative, Hunter. In a small town, the narrative beats the truth every single time. He wasn't refusing the case because he was lazy. He was refusing it because he knew the outcome was already written. I walked out of his office into the bright, blinding sunlight, feeling a cold weight settle in my chest. It wasn't despair. It was clarity. The law was a dead end. The arraignment was 2 hours later. It was a kangaroo court in the truest sense. I stood before Judge Oliver. He was an older man with silver hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite, but his eyes were empty. He didn't look at me. He looked at papers. He looked at the prosecutor. He looked at Officer Victor, who was sitting in the front row, wearing his dress uniform, looking like the picture of a hero cop. Tessa was there, too. She sat 2 rows behind Victor, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She wouldn't look at me. The charges are serious, Judge Oliver droned, his voice echoing in the wood-paneled room. Assault on an officer. Endangering the welfare of a minor. The state requests a protective order. Your Honor, I spoke up, ignoring the public defender assigned to me, who was busy scrolling on his phone. The officer choked my autistic son. I intervened to save his life. Silence, Oliver snapped. He finally looked at me, and I saw the disdain. You will speak when spoken to. Another outburst, and I will hold you in contempt. He turned to the prosecutor. Granted. Full no-contact order. The defendant is to stay 500 yards away from the marital home and the minor child, Evan. The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. You can't do that, I said, my voice rising. He needs me. He doesn't speak to anyone else. Bail is set at $50,000, Oliver said, ignoring me completely. Next case. I was escorted out by 2 bailiffs who gripped my arms a little too tight. As I passed the gallery, Victor turned his head. He winked. Just a subtle, slow drop of one eyelid. Tessa was looking down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring, the ring I bought her after my 3rd deployment. I posted bail an hour later using cash I had buried in the storage unit. I walked out of the courthouse a free man on paper, but I had lost everything that mattered. I couldn't go home. I couldn't see Evan. I drove to a motel on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where people pay by the hour and nobody asks for ID. I set up my laptop on the stained desk and opened the secure feed from the house. It was worse than I imagined. Tessa was in the kitchen, pouring wine. Victor was there, too. He had his boots up on my coffee table. Did you see his face? Victor laughed, swirling a beer bottle. When Oliver dropped the no-contact order, I thought he was going to snap right there. Is Evan okay? Tessa asked. She sounded distant. The kid is fine, Victor said dismissively. He's in his room. Lock the door. Better that way. We don't want him wandering around while we celebrate. Celebrate. They were celebrating taking a father away from his special needs son. I switched the camera view to the hallway upstairs. I could hear faint sounds coming from behind Evan's door. It was a low, rhythmic thumping. He was banging his head against the wall. He did that when the anxiety got too high, when he couldn't process the noise in his head. I watched the screen, my hands trembling. Not from fear. From the effort it took not to drive my truck through the front wall of that house and kill them both with my bare hands. But that was what they wanted. If I attacked now, I was the violent maniac they claimed I was. I would go to prison for life, and Evan would be left in the system, alone. I had to be smarter. I had to be colder. I closed the laptop and picked up the satellite phone. It vibrated. A text message from Dominic. Landed. 2 hours out. Grant and Mason are with me. We brought the van. Grant was an ex-ranger with a skill set in electronic warfare. Mason was a combat medic who could make a man feel pain in ways anatomy shouldn't allow. I took a deep breath. The legal system had failed. Society's rules had been suspended. I went to the bathroom of the motel and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. The tired father, the husband trying to make it work, the guy who just wanted to grill on weekends, that guy was gone. I reached into my bag and pulled out a map of the town. I spread it out on the bed. I circled the police station. I circled Judge Oliver's house. I circled the warehouse district where Victor's unit allegedly stored evidence. I wasn't a defendant anymore. I was the mission commander. I sat down and began to clean my sidearm. The rhythmic click-clack of the slide the only sound in the room. Tonight, the law ended. Tonight, the haunting began. The lock on my motel room door didn't rattle. It didn't shake. It simply clicked, a single, sharp sound in the silence of 2 a.m., and the door swung open. I didn't reach for the pistol on the nightstand. I knew that sound. If it had been Victor's goons, they would have kicked the door in. This was finesse. This was family. Dominic filled the doorway. He's 6'4", a wall of muscle and scars, with a beard that hides a jaw shattered by shrapnel and Fallujah. He didn't smile. He just stepped inside, followed immediately by Grant and Mason. The door clicked shut behind them. The room instantly felt smaller. "You look like hell, boss," Dominic said, his voice a low rumble. "They took my house," I said, standing up. "They took my kid." Grant, a wire-thin man with glasses who looks more like an accountant than the deadliest cyber warfare specialist the Navy ever produced, immediately went to the window. He scanned the parking lot through the blinds, then pulled a small device from his pocket. He swept the room for bugs. "Clean," Grant muttered. He dropped a heavy duffel bag on the bed. "We brought the toys." Mason, the medic, walked straight to me. He didn't say a word. He just gripped my shoulder, squeezing hard enough to bruise. It was the only hug men like us knew how to give. "Sit, Rep," Dominic commanded, sitting on the flimsy motel chair which groaned under his weight. I turned the laptop around. I didn't need to explain. I just pressed play. They watched in silence. They watched Officer Victor choke Evan. They saw the fear in my son's eyes. They watched Tessa, my wife, the woman who had hosted them for barbecues, the woman who had laughed at their jokes, walk into the frame and kiss the man who hurt our boy. The air in the room changed. It grew heavy, charged with a specific kind of static electricity that happens right before violence. Mason looked away from the screen, his jaw working. He put hands on Evan. "Choked him," I said. Then he framed me for it. Judge Oliver signed the order. Tessa is helping them. Grant was already typing on his own rig, a ruggedized laptop he'd set up on the dresser. "Oliver, Oliver," he muttered, his fingers flying across the keys. "I'm in the county server. Here it is. Oliver has dismissed 14 DUI charges for officers in this precinct in the last 3 years. He's got a vacation home in the Caymans that a judge's salary can't buy." "And Victor?" Dominic asked. "Victor is the bagman," I said. "He runs the streets. Drugs, protection rackets. He uses the badge as a shield. If you cross him, you get arrested. If you fight back, you get resisting arrest added to your obituary." Dominic cracked his knuckles. "So, we have a target-rich environment. We can't just kick doors," I warned. "This isn't Baghdad. There are cameras. There are civilians. If we go loud, the FBI comes down on us, and Victor wins. We have to be ghosts." "I like ghosts," Mason said softly, pulling a knife from his boot and cleaning a speck of dirt from the blade. "Grant," I said, "I need eyes on Victor. Not just the house. I need his phone. I need his car. I need to know when he takes a leak." "Give me 20 minutes, Grant said. "If it has a microchip, I own it." We spent the next hour turning that cheap motel room into a command center. Grant set up a localized signal jammer so no one could track our location. He then cloned Victor's cell phone signal. It wasn't legal, but legality had left the building the moment a corrupt cop put his hands on my son. "Got him," Grant said. "He's not at your house anymore. He's moving. GPS shows him heading south, toward the industrial district." "What's down there?" Dominic asked. "Old textile mills," I said. "Mostly abandoned. The city has been trying to rezone it for years. Let's go for a ride, Dominic said. We took the van they arrived in. It was a nondescript plumbing van on the outside, but inside, it was reinforced steel and surveillance gear. Dominic drove. I sat in the back with the monitors. We trailed Victor's signal from a distance. He pulled into a rusted, chain-link fenced lot behind a derelict factory. The sign said City Impound Lot B, but there were no city workers here at 3 a.m. Grant zoomed in with the thermal camera mounted on the van's roof. Heat signatures, Grant whispered. 4 of them, plus Victor. On the screen, 5 glowing orange figures stood in a circle. They were passing something between them. Envelopes. Mason observed, squinting at the grainy monitor. Cash drops. Wait, I said, leaning forward. Zoom in on the one on the left. The tall one. Grant enhanced the image. It was Kyle, the desk sergeant who had threatened me. So the whole station is in on it, Dominic noted. It's a hive. It gets worse, Grant said. I'm scrubbing the audio from Victor's phone. Listen to this. He isolated the audio feed from the microphone in Victor's pocket. It was muffled, scratchy, but intelligible. The husband is out of the picture. Victor's voice came through the speakers. Oliver fast-tracked the hearing. We have the house. What about the kid? Kyle's voice. He's a liability, Vic. If he talks. He doesn't talk, Victor laughed. He's a retard. And even if he tries, who's gonna believe him? We'll stick him in the state facility in Pine Creek next week. Tessa already signed the preliminary papers. She thinks it's a specialized school. My blood ran cold. Pine Creek wasn't a school. It was a dumping ground for the state's unwanted wards. It was a hellhole of sedation and neglect. She signed the papers. I whispered. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like white fire. Tessa wasn't just stealing my money. She was throwing our son into a pit so she could be free of the burden. Dominic turned around in the driver's seat. His eyes were hard. We take them now. No, I said. Not yet. If we take them now, it looks like a gang hit. They get a hero's funeral. The media spins it. Tessa plays the grieving widow. Then what? Mason asked. We make them turn on each other, I said. We make them paranoid. We make them think the devil has come to collect. Psychological warfare, Grant grinned in the dark. My favorite. Start with Kyle? I ordered. He's the weak link. He likes to talk. Let's give him something to talk about. We drove back to the motel in silence, but the energy was different now. We weren't just reacting. We were hunting. Back in the room, Grant pulled up Tessa's digital footprint. He was looking for accounts, emails, anything we could use. Hunter, Grant said, his voice hesitant. You need to see this. He turned the screen toward me. It was an email thread between Tessa and a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, and a state lawyer, dated 3 months ago. Subject, life insurance policy adjustment. Body, if the policyholder dies due to an accident or suicide, the payout is immediate, correct? And as the sole beneficiary, I would have control over the trust for the minor child. I read the words twice. 3 months ago. This wasn't an affair that got out of hand. This wasn't a sudden mistake. She's been planning this, I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. She's been planning to get rid of me for months. Betrayal isn't the right word for this, Dominic said softly, standing behind me. This is an execution. She didn't count on one thing, I said, standing up and walking to the window. I looked out at the city lights, knowing my son was out there somewhere, scared and alone in a house with enemies. What's that? Mason asked. She didn't check the expiration date on my skills, I said, and she forgot who my friends are. I turned back to them. Tomorrow night, we start the haunt, I said. Grant, I want you to hack the smart home system in my house. I want the lights to flicker. I want the temperature to drop. I want them to hear noises in the walls. Done, Grant said. Mason, I looked at the medic. You're going to pay a visit to Kyle's car. Nothing lethal. Just terrifying. I'll make him wish he took the bus, Mason promised. And Dominic, I said. Yeah, boss. You and I are going to visit the impound lot, I said. Victor likes his toys. Let's see how he likes it when his toys break. The plan was set. They thought they had buried me. They thought they had won. But all they had done was dig their own graves. We moved out the next night. The moon was a sliver, barely lighting the streets, which was perfect for us. Mason vanished first, heading toward the precinct to locate Kyle's personal vehicle. Grant stayed in the van, his fingers dancing across 3 different keyboards, the blue light reflecting in his glasses. He was the conductor of this symphony. We were just the instruments. Dominic and I took a secondary car, a beat-up sedan Grant had acquired earlier that day with cash and fake plates. We parked 3 blocks from the impound lot. Grant, give me eyes, I said into my comms. 2 patrols circling the perimeter. Grant's voice was calm in my earpiece. Shift change in 10 minutes. That's your window. We moved through the shadows of the industrial park. The fence was 12 feet high with razor wire, but for 2 SEALs, it was a speed bump. We were inside in 30 seconds. The lot was filled with seized vehicles, drug dealer rides, cars from fatal accidents, and, in the back, Victor's personal collection. We knew from Grant's intel that Victor kept the proceeds of his corruption here. Classic muscle cars, restored and hidden under tarps, bought with dirty money. Target acquired, Dominic whispered. He pointed to a row of 3 covered cars. We didn't destroy them. That would be vandalism. We did something worse. We made them unsafe. We loosened brake lines. We rewired the electrical systems to short out at high speeds. We planted tracking devices deep in the chassis where no mechanic would ever look. Then, we left a calling card. Inside the glove box of the center car, a pristine '69 Camaro, I placed a single photo. It was a picture of Victor and Tessa kissing in my kitchen. Printed on the back was a date and time. Tomorrow, midnight. We melted back into the night just as the patrol car rolled by. Back in the van, Grant was laughing. What? I asked. I'm in your house, Grant said. Watch this. He pulled up the feed from the living room camera. Tessa and Victor were on the couch, watching TV. They looked relaxed, smug. Grant hit a key. On the screen, the lights in my house flickered violently. Then, the TV shut off. Victor stood up, reaching for his gun instinctively. Power surge. Probably, Tessa said, annoyed. This house is old. Then, the smart speaker in the corner, the one we used for weather updates, lit up blue. I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that, the speaker said in a distorted, robotic voice. It was a line from 2001, A Space Odyssey, but Grant had pitched the audio down to make it sound demonic. Tessa screamed. What the hell was that? Alexa, stop. Victor yelled at the device. I am watching you, the speaker replied, the voice dropping even lower. Badge number 492. I see you. Victor ripped the power cord out of the wall. The room plunged into darkness. Who is doing that? Tessa shrieked. Hunter, is that you? It's not him, Victor snarled, turning on his tactical flashlight. He doesn't know how to hack a system like this. It's just a glitch, or some kid messing with the frequency. But I saw his face in the flashlight beam. He was sweating. We regrouped at the motel at 4 a.m. Mason walked in, looking pleased with himself. Kyle found the surprise. Dominic asked, let's just say his morning commute is going to be aromatic. Mason smirked. Dead fish in the air vents. And I rewired his horn to the brake pedal. Every time he stops, it blares. He's going to be a nervous wreck by noon. We slept in shifts, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the email. Life insurance. The next day, Grant intercepted a call. We have a problem. It was Tessa calling Victor. What now? Victor sounded tired. The bank called. Hunter's accounts. They're frozen. I smiled. I had called the fraud department of my bank the moment I left the house, flagging all activity as suspicious. Frozen? Victor shouted. You said you had his pins. I do. But it says contact account holder. Victor, we needed that cash for the lawyer. For the Pine Creek deposit. Pine Creek. The facility for Evan. I'll fix it, Victor growled. I'll have Oliver sign a court order to release the funds. Just sit tight. There's something else, Tessa said, her voice trembling. I found something in Evan's room. My heart stopped. What did she find? What? A drawing. He drew a picture of a man in black, standing over your bed. Victor, the drawing is dated this morning. I looked at Dominic. Dominic looked at me. We hadn't been in Evan's room. We didn't go upstairs, I whispered. Grant was typing furiously, rewinding the feed from last night, checking the hallway camera. He scrubbed the video back. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., nothing. Then, at 4:12 a.m., a shadow moved. It wasn't us. A figure, small and silent, slipped out of Evan's room. It was Evan. He walked down the hall to the master bedroom where Tessa and Victor were sleeping. He stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching. Then, he turned and looked directly into the camera lens. He waved. My breath caught in my throat. Evan knew. He knew about the cameras. He knew I was watching. He went back to his room. He's awake, I said, tears pricking my eyes. He's fighting back in his own way. The kid's a spook, Dominic said with admiration. He moves quieter than we do. Suddenly, Grant's screen flashed red. Intercept. Grant yelled. High priority. Victor's burner phone. We huddled around the speaker. Boss, it's me. It was a new voice. Rough. Gravelly. Not a cop. Did you find him? Victor asked. Yeah. We found the husband's truck. Parked behind a grocery store on 5th. But he ain't in it. Find him, Victor hissed. And when you do, make it look like a suicide. Use his own gun. The note is already written. The room went deadly silent. This was the twist. They weren't just planning to jail me. They weren't just planning to institutionalize Evan. They were going to kill me. Tonight. The email, I realized. The life insurance. Accident or suicide. She needs a body to get the payout immediately. Dominic stood up, racking the slide of his pistol. Well, that changes the rules of engagement. It sure does, I said. I looked at the map. They want a suicide. Let's give them a ghost story they'll never forget. Grant, I said. Send a text to Victor from an unknown number. Tell him I'm hiding at the old lumber mill. Tell him I'm armed and losing my mind. You're baiting them into a kill box, Grant said, his eyes widening. I'm inviting them to a party, I said. And we're the entertainment. What about Tessa? Mason asked. She stays at the house, I said. She thinks she's safe. But tonight, she's going to get a visit from the only thing scarier than a ghost. Who? The truth, I said. Grant, prepare the broadcast. Broadcast? Tonight, I said. Every screen in that house, the TV, the laptop, the smart fridge, is going to play the footage of her betrayal on a loop. And we're going to stream it to the police station lobby while we're at it. Nuclear option, Dominic grinned. No, I said, strapping on my vest. Nuclear is quick. This is going to be slow. The sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky a bruised purple. It was the color of a fresh hematoma. Fitting. We split up. Dominic and Mason took the van to the lumber mill to set the stage. Grant stayed at the motel to run Overwatch and execute the digital assault. I took the sedan. I had one stop to make before the main event. I drove to Judge Oliver's house. It was a mansion on the hill, secluded, surrounded by wrought iron gates. But gates are for honest people. I parked a mile away and hiked through the woods, approaching from the rear. Oliver was on his patio, nursing a scotch, staring out at the town he thought he owned. He looked peaceful, ignorant. I didn't touch him. I didn't need to. I slipped onto the property and located the junction box for his security system. I didn't cut the wires. I spliced into them. I connected a small, black drive Grant had prepared. Then, I left a package on his patio table, just out of his line of sight. A manila envelope. Inside were photos. Not of him, but of his bank statements from the Caymans. And a printout of a federal indictment draft with his name on it. It was fake, forged by Grant, but it looked terrifyingly real. I retreated to the tree line and texted Grant, "Execute Phase 1." On the patio, Oliver's phone buzzed. Then his house lights flashed. His outdoor speakers crackled to life. "Judge Oliver." A distorted voice boomed across the lawn. "Case number 492 is now in session." Oliver jumped, spilling his scotch. He spun around, terror etched on his face. "Who's there?" "Is that you, Victor?" "This isn't funny." "The verdict is guilty," the voice continued. "The sentence is ruin." Then, the lights cut out completely. Darkness swallowed him. I watched through my night vision as he scrambled for the door, tripping over the patio furniture, clawing at the handle in a panic. I let him run. Fear spreads like a virus. He would call Victor. He would scream that the feds were watching. He would fracture the alliance. I melted back into the woods. One down. Meanwhile, at the lumber mill, Dominic and Mason were turning the abandoned site into a nightmare. They rigged flashbangs on tripwires. They set up directional speakers that would project the sound of footsteps running behind you. They placed strobe lights in the rafters. It wasn't lethal. It was a funhouse from hell. I arrived at the mill at 10 p.m. The text had been sent to Victor an hour ago. "Hunter is at the old mill. He has the files. He's going to the press in the morning." It was the perfect lure. Greed and fear. We waited in the rafters, 30 feet up, hidden in the gloom. At 10:45 p.m., headlights cut through the darkness. 3 cars. Not police cruisers, personal vehicles. A black truck, a sedan, and Victor's Charger. They killed the lights and rolled to a stop. Doors opened. Victor stepped out. He was wearing tactical gear, vest, drop holster, assault rifle. This wasn't an arrest. This was a hit squad. 6 men total. Kyle was there, looking twitchy. The other 4 were the off-the-books muscle Victor used for dirty work. "Spread out," Victor whispered, his voice carrying in the silent mill. "He's here. I can smell him." "Rules?" Kyle asked, his voice shaking. "No rules," Victor said. "Put him down. Plant the throwdown gun. We go home." I looked at Dominic in the dark. He nodded. We let them enter the main warehouse floor. It was a cavernous space, filled with rusted machinery and shadows. When they were all inside, I pressed the button on my remote. Clang. The massive metal bay doors behind them slammed shut, triggered by the magnetic locks we'd rewired. The squad spun around, weapons raised. "What the hell?" one of the muscle guys yelled. Then, the lights went out. Pitch black. Night vision. Victor barked. "Eyes on." They flipped down their goggles. But we were ready for that. Grant hit the strobes. Bright, blinding white light pulsed at irregular intervals. If you're wearing night vision goggles, a strobe light is like staring into the sun. It blinds you instantly. They screamed, tearing the goggles off their faces, stumbling in the flashing chaos. "Welcome, gentlemen," my voice echoed from the speakers, bouncing off the steel walls so they couldn't pinpoint the source. "You are trespassing. Show yourself, coward." Victor screamed, firing a burst blindly into the ceiling. Bullets sparked against the steel beams harmlessly. "You wanted a war," I said calmly. "You brought guns to a family dispute. You threatened my son." Bang! A flashbang went off near Kyle's feet. He shrieked and scrambled backward, falling over a pile of lumber. "I am not the one you should be afraid of," I continued. "You should be afraid of the dark." Dominic dropped from the rafters on a rappel line, silent as smoke. He landed behind the rearmost gunman. He didn't use a gun. He used a sleeper hold. In 3 seconds, the man was unconscious, lowered gently to the floor. Dominic vanished back into the shadows before anyone noticed. "Count off," Victor yelled. "Sound off. 1, 2, 3, 4. Silence. "Where's Miller?" Victor screamed. "Miller." No answer. Panic started to set in. They were shooting at shadows now, wasting ammo. "He's picking us off," Kyle whimpered. "Vic, we gotta go. This is a trap." "Shut up." Victor pistol whipped him. "He's one man. Find him and kill him." I dropped a smoke grenade from my perch. "Vic." Gray smoke filled the floor, turning the strobe-lit room into a disorienting gray void. Mason was on the ground now. He moved through the smoke like a shark in water. He grabbed the second gunman, pulled him into the darkness, and zip-tied him before the guy could draw breath. 2 down. Victor, I spoke again. Tessa isn't waiting for you. She's watching a movie. Would you like to see? Grant projected the video onto the far wall of the warehouse. It wasn't a movie. It was the live feed from my house. The lights in my living room were blasting at full brightness. The TV was blaring static. And on the walls of my living room, projected by the smart projector I had installed for movie nights, was the text message thread between Tessa and Victor. Can we kill him? Just make it look like suicide. Tessa was curled in a ball on the couch, sobbing, covering her ears. Victor stared at the wall, paralyzed. How? She knows you failed, Victor, I said. And now, the whole world is going to know. I signaled Dominic and Mason. Phase 2. Isolate the target. We took the other 2 gunmen down in rapid succession. A tranquilizer dart for one. A swift baton strike to the knee for the other. Within minutes, it was just Victor and Kyle left standing in the center of the swirling smoke. Kyle broke. He dropped his gun. I'm done. I'm done. Don't kill me. Kyle. Victor roared, aiming his rifle at his own man. Pick it up. No. Kyle sobbed, hands in the air. He's a SEAL, Victor. He's a ghost. We can't beat him. Victor pulled the trigger. Click. His magazine was empty. He had sprayed it all at the shadows. He fumbled for a reload, his hands shaking. I stepped out of the smoke, 10 feet in front of him. I wasn't holding a gun. I was holding a tablet. It's over, Victor, I said. He jammed a fresh mag in and raised the rifle. But before he could fire, red laser dots appeared on his chest. 3 of them. 1 from Dominic on the left. 1 from Mason on the right. 1 from Grant, who had a remote-operated turret set up on the catwalk. A bluff, but Victor didn't know that. Drop it, I said. Victor stared at me. He looked at the lasers. He looked at Kyle cowering on the floor. The arrogance drained out of him. The swagger vanished. He wasn't a powerful cop anymore. He was just a thug who got caught. The rifle clattered to the concrete. You can't prove anything, Victor sneered, though his voice wavered. It's your word against mine. I am the law. I tapped the tablet screen. Actually, Victor, you're the star of a live stream. I turned the tablet around. It showed a Facebook live feed. Views, 14,000. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. Is this real? That's Chief Victor. Did he just try to shoot his partner? Call the FBI. We've been live for 10 minutes, I said. The state police are already on their way. The FBI is 5 minutes out. Dominic called them when you entered the building. Victor's knees gave out. He slumped to the ground, defeated not by a bullet, but by the truth. I walked up to him, looming over him. You choked my son, I whispered. I drew my fist back. I wanted to end him. I wanted to shatter his jaw. Every fiber of my being screamed for violence. But then I thought of Evan. I thought of the man I needed to be for him. I lowered my hand. But I'm not you, I said. I zip-tied his hands behind his back and shoved him face down into the dirt. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting louder. Blue and red lights began to flash through the high windows, cutting through the smoke. The cavalry had arrived. But they weren't here to save me. I had already saved myself. The adrenaline dump that follows a firefight, or in this case, a tactical takedown, is a strange beast. Your hands stop shaking, but your knees feel like they are made of water. I stood in the swirling smoke of the lumber mill, watching the state troopers zip-tie Victor's squad. They were dragging them out like sacks of garbage, their tough guy facades completely shattered. Victor was the last to go. He was screaming, spitting, threatening lawsuits, threatening to have badges pulled. But then a black SUV rolled into the warehouse, flanked by 2 unmarked sedans. A man in a crisp suit stepped out. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like a shark in a tailored jacket. Julian. I nodded, cutting the zip tie on my own wrist that I'd used to secure my gear. Hunter. Julian replied, looking around the chaotic scene. He stepped over a flashbang canister. You certainly know how to throw a party. The Bureau thanks you for the gift wrap. Julian was my contact, the one I had called when Dominic landed. The FBI had been building a RICO case against a corruption ring in the state for 2 years, but they lacked the smoking gun. I had just handed them a smoking cannon. He's all yours, I said, pointing to Victor, who had gone silent the moment he saw the FBI windbreakers. Julian walked over to Victor. He didn't yell. He just leaned in close. Officer Victor, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, wire fraud, and deprivation of rights under color of law. And thanks to Mr. Hunter's live stream, we don't even need to wait for a grand jury. Victor slumped. The fight left his eyes. He looked small. Where is she? I asked Julian, my voice tight. Agents are securing the residence now, Julian said. We waited for your signal. We didn't want to tip her off until Victor was in custody. I want to be the one to open the door, I said. Julian looked at me. He saw the look in my eyes, not vengeance, but a desperate need for closure. He nodded. Ride with me. We left Dominic and the team to clean up the gear. They would fade away before the press arrived in full force. That was the deal. They were ghosts. The ride to my house took 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. The street was quiet. The neighbors were asleep, unaware that their safe suburban enclave was about to become national news. 2 black sedans were parked silently at the end of the block. She's inside, Julian said. We cut the internet and cell service 2 minutes ago, so she couldn't see the news of the arrest. I walked up the driveway. My driveway. The concrete was cracked where the tree roots had pushed up. I had meant to fix that next summer. It seemed so trivial now. I unlocked the front door with my key. The house was dark, except for the blue light of the TV in the living room. The broadcast we had hacked earlier had stopped when the internet was cut, leaving a static screen. Tessa was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled to her chest, a glass of wine in her hand. She jumped when the door opened. Victor, she called out, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and hope. Did you do it? Is it over? She stood up, rushing into the hallway, squinting into the gloom. Why are the lights out? I tried to call you, but my phone isn't working. I stepped into the light of the hallway. Tessa stopped. The glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor. Red wine splashed across her bare feet like blood. Hunter, she whispered. She looked behind me, expecting to see Victor with a gun. Instead, she saw Julian and 2 agents with FBI across their chests. Her face went through a dozen contortions in a second. Shock, terror, calculation. And then, the mask slid back into place. Oh, thank God, she cried out, rushing toward me. Hunter, you're alive. I was so scared. She tried to throw her arms around me. I caught her wrists. I didn't squeeze hard, but I held her away from me. Her skin felt cold. Stop, I said. Hunter, you don't understand, she babbled, tears instantly springing to her eyes. Victor, he's crazy. He threatened me. He said he would hurt Evan if I didn't help him. I was a hostage in my own home. It was a brilliant performance. If I hadn't heard the phone calls, if I hadn't seen the texts, I might have believed her. She was the weeping, terrified mother. He forced me to sign those papers, she sobbed, trying to pull her hands free. He made me give him the bank codes. I did it to protect you. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I pressed play. The audio was crisp. It was the recording from the kitchen 2 days ago. Will he go to jail? Tessa's voice, calm and calculating. Maybe. Or a psych ward. And the disability checks. Everything. Okay, let's do it. The recording echoed in the silent hallway. Tessa went still. The tears stopped instantly. Her face hardened, the soft, victimized look vanishing into a scowl of pure hatred. She realized the game was over. You bastard, she hissed. You illegally recorded me. And you conspired to have the father of your child murdered for a pension check, Julian said, stepping forward. Tessa, you are under arrest. You can't prove intent, she screamed as the agents moved in. I was coerced. I'll get a lawyer. I'll take everything. You'll get a court-appointed defender, I said calmly. Because the assets are frozen, Tessa, and the insurance policy, the one you asked about, it doesn't pay out for prison sentences. She started screaming then. Vile, hateful things. She screamed that I was a loser, a broken soldier, that she deserved better. She screamed that she hated Evan, that he was a burden who ruined her life. That last part hit me harder than the betrayal. She hated our son. I watched them handcuff her. I watched them lead her out the door, kicking and screaming, into the back of the sedan. She looked back once, her eyes wild, but I didn't look at her. I turned toward the stairs. Clear the house, Julian ordered his agents. But give him a minute upstairs. I walked up the steps. My legs felt heavy. The hallway was dark. I reached Evan's door. It was locked from the inside. Evan, I called out softly. Buddy, it's Dad. Silence. It's over, Evan. The bad men are gone. Mom had to go away for a while. But I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I heard a shuffle. The click of the lock. The door creaked open a crack. One eye peered out. He was wearing his noise-canceling headphones around his neck. He was holding a Lego spaceship in one hand, a defensive weapon. Is the loud noise gone? He whispered. Yeah, I said, my throat tightening. The loud noise is gone. He opened the door fully. He looked at me, scanning for injuries. He touched my arm, checking. You were gone, he stated. A fact. I had to go fix something, I said. I knelt down so I was eye level with him. But I'm back. And I promise, I'm never leaving you alone again. Evan looked at me for a long moment. Then, he did something he rarely does. He leaned forward and rested his forehead against mine. Okay, he said. We stayed like that for a minute, just breathing. The nightmare outside, the sirens, the police, the flashing lights, felt a million miles away. Dad, yeah, buddy. I'm hungry. I laughed. It was a wet, choked sound, but it was a laugh. Me too, buddy. Me too. Can we have pancakes? It's midnight, Evan. Pancakes, he insisted. Okay, I said, standing up and wiping my eyes. Pancakes it is. We walked downstairs. The living room was swarming with FBI agents bagging evidence. They were taking Tessa's laptop, her phone, the files on the table. Julian was directing traffic. But when Evan and I walked into the kitchen, the agents stopped. They stepped aside. They gave us space. I found the pancake mix. I found the pan. And while the Federal Bureau of Investigation dismantled the criminal empire that had tried to destroy my family in my living room, I stood at the stove and flipped pancakes for my son. But as I watched the batter bubble, I knew it wasn't completely over. Victor and Tessa were in cuffs, yes. But Judge Oliver was still out there. And he was the one holding the gavel. My phone buzzed. A text from Grant. Oliver is on the run. His passport just got flagged at the airport. But he's not alone. He made a call to someone before he ran. Someone higher up. I flipped the pancake. Eat up, buddy, I said to Evan. We have a busy day tomorrow. The snake's head was cut off, but the venom was still in the system. And I was going to drain every drop. The pancakes tasted like sawdust in my mouth, but Evan ate 4 of them, drowning them in syrup. He seemed oblivious to the FBI agents moving furniture in the living room, focused entirely on the sugar rush. That was his superpower, the ability to detach when the world got too loud. I wished I had it. Julian walked into the kitchen at 1:30 a.m. He looked tired. We got the warrant for Oliver, he said, accepting the cup of coffee I poured him. But he's in the wind. State police found his car abandoned at the airport, but he didn't get on a plane. Security footage shows him getting into a private sedan. Who picked him up? I asked. Senator Blackwell's chief of staff, Julian said grimly. I froze. Blackwell, the law and order senator. The one who campaigned on cleaning up the streets. The one who had endorsed Victor for a commendation last year. So it goes to the top, I said. It goes to the Capitol, Julian corrected. If Oliver talks, Blackwell's career is over. He's not rescuing Oliver, Hunter. He's cleaning up a loose end. They're going to kill him, I realized. And if Oliver dies, the testimony dies. Victor might cut a deal. Tessa might walk. Julian didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew how the game was played. Without the ringleader to tie the conspiracy together, a good lawyer could spin Victor as a rogue cop and Tessa as a coerced victim. Where would they take him? I asked. Blackwell owns a hunting lodge, Julian said, tapping his tablet. Up in the Cascades. Middle of nowhere. It's technically outside our jurisdiction until we get a federal warrant, which takes time. Time we don't have. I looked at Evan. He was asleep at the table, his head resting on his arms, a fork still clutched in his hand. I can't leave him, I said. My agents will stay, Julian promised. This house is the safest place in America right now. For federal agents at the door. I'll personally sit in this kitchen until you get back. I looked at Julian. He was a suit, a fed, a by-the-book guy. But I saw the anger in his eyes. He hated losing. You're asking me to go get him, I said. I'm not asking anything, Julian said, taking a sip of coffee. I'm just mentioning that my team is tied up with processing the crime scene here. And if a private citizen happened to spot a fugitive in the mountains, well, we'd be obligated to respond to the tip. I nodded. Plausible deniability. Dominic is still in town, I said. I didn't see him, Julian winked. I carried Evan upstairs and tucked him into bed. He murmured something about spaceships and rolled over. I kissed his forehead, grabbed my gear bag from the closet, and walked out the back door. Dominic, Mason, and Grant were waiting in the van 2 streets over. They already had the coordinates. Grant is scary fast. Hunting lodge, Dominic said as I climbed in. Tactical entry. Rescue mission, I corrected. We need Oliver alive. He's the only one who can bury Tessa for good. The drive to the mountains took 3 hours. We arrived just before dawn. The lodge was a fortress of log and stone, perched on a cliff overlooking a ravine. There were 2 armed guards at the gate, private security, mercenaries. Blackwell doesn't trust the cops for this, Mason noted, watching through thermal binoculars. These guys are pros, moving like contractors. Grant, kill the comms, I ordered. Grant tapped his keyboard. Cell service is dead. Landlines cut. They are isolated. We moved in through the tree line. The air was thin and cold. It smelled of pine and impending violence. We didn't go loud. We used the noise of the rushing river below to mask our approach. Dominic took the guard on the east perimeter. I took the west. Simultaneous takedowns. Silent. Efficient. We stacked up at the back door. Grant bypassed the electronic lock in 10 seconds. Inside, the lodge was warm. A fire was crackling in the massive stone hearth. We heard voices in the main room. Please, a voice begged. It was Oliver. I won't say anything. I have money. I can disappear. You're a liability, Judge, a smooth, cold voice replied. The senator is disappointed. You let a local cop and a housewife ruin a 10-year operation. It was the husband. Oliver cried. He's crazy. He's special forces. He's a ghost, the cold voice said. And ghosts can't testify. But you can. So, the sound of a slide racking. A gun being loaded. Breach, I whispered. Dominic kicked the door. It splintered inward. We flowed into the room like water. Mason went left, Dominic right. I took the center. There were 3 men standing around Oliver, who was tied to a chair. They were holding suppressed pistols. Drop it, I shouted. They didn't drop it. They spun and fired. Thwip thwip. Suppressor fire is quiet, but the bullets are just as deadly. A round took a chunk out of the door frame by my head. I double-tapped the center gunman. 2 shots to the chest. He went down. Dominic dropped the one on the right with a precision shot to the shoulder, spinning him around before Mason tackled him. The 3rd gunman, the one with the cold voice, grabbed Oliver by the collar and dragged him behind the heavy oak bar, using the judge as a human shield. Back off, he screamed. I'll blow his head off. We held our fire. Oliver was blubbering, snot running down his face. Help me. Don't let him kill me. You're the husband. The gunman shouted from behind the bar. The seal. You're supposed to be in jail. I have a good lawyer, I said, moving slowly to the left, drawing his eye. Let the judge go. You walk away. Walk away. The gunman laughed nervously. Blackwell will kill me if I fail. He's going to kill you anyway, I said. You're a loose end, just like Oliver. You think the senator leaves witnesses. The gunman hesitated. Just for a second. That was all Dominic needed. He had flanked around the kitchen side. He popped up from behind the island. Thwip. One shot. It hit the gunman's hand. He screamed and dropped the pistol. I vaulted the bar and pinned him to the floor before he could reach for his backup weapon. It's over, I told him. I pulled Oliver up by his tie. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. He looked at me with terror. You, he whispered. You're the one from the patio. I'm the one who decides if you live or die right now, I said. You're going to testify, Oliver. You're going to tell the feds everything. About Victor. About Tessa. About Blackwell. They'll kill me, he sobbed. If you don't testify, I said, leaning in close, I'll leave you here with him. I pointed to the gunman groaning on the floor, and I'll turn the lights off on my way out. Oliver swallowed hard. He looked at the gunman. He looked at me. I'll talk, he whispered. I'll tell them everything. We zip-tied everyone. Grant called Julian. Package secured, Grant said. And we found a bonus. The gunman has a phone with text from the senator. The sun was coming up over the mountains when the FBI choppers arrived. It was a beautiful sight. I watched them load Oliver onto the bird. He looked like a broken man, but to me, he looked like victory. Dominic clapped me on the shoulder. Not bad for a retired guy. I'm not retired, I said, watching the helicopter ascend. I'm just a dad. We drove back down the mountain in silence. The mission was done. The threat was neutralized. But I still had one thing left to do. I had to visit Tessa. Not to gloat. Not to yell. But to say goodbye. Julian arranged it. A secure visitation room at the county holding facility. She was sitting at a metal table, wearing an orange jumpsuit. Her hair was messy. Her makeup was gone. She looked 10 years older. When I walked in, she didn't look up. You win, she said, her voice raspy. Are you happy? No, I said, sitting down opposite her. I'm not happy. I'm a single father with a traumatized son and a house full of bad memories. She looked up then. Her eyes were red. I just wanted a life, Hunter. You were always gone. Or you were distant. Victor. He made me feel alive. He made you a criminal, I said. He made you try to kill me. I didn't want you dead. She insisted, though we both knew it was a lie. I just wanted the money. I wanted security. You wanted easy, I said. You wanted the shortcut. And you were willing to throw Evan away to get it. She flinched. I would have visited him. No, you wouldn't have, I said. You would have forgotten him. Just like you forgot your vows. I stood up. I filed the divorce papers this morning, I said. Sole custody. No visitation. The judge granted it immediately, given the circumstances. You can't keep my son from me, she screamed, standing up, the chains rattling. He's not your son anymore, I said quietly. You sold him. I turned to the door. Hunter, she yelled. Hunter, please. Don't leave me here. I can't do prison. I'm scared. I stopped. I looked back at her. The woman I had loved. The woman I had built a life with. She was a stranger now. You should be scared, I said. It's dark in there. I walked out. The heavy steel door clanged shut behind me, cutting off her screams. I walked out into the sunlight. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, but to me, it smelled like freedom. I got in my truck. Evan was waiting at my sister's house. I had dropped him there on the way back. I had a promise to keep. Pancakes. The sun rose over the city, but it didn't look the same. The streets were swarming with black SUVs. The local police precinct, the fortress that Victor had treated like his personal castle, was being raided. I stood on the sidewalk across the street, holding a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching federal agents carry out boxes of files. Julian walked over, looking exhausted but triumphant. "It's a domino effect," Julian said, gesturing to the line of officers being escorted out in handcuffs. "Oliver started talking the second we put him in the interview room. He gave us everything. The bank accounts, the judges on the payroll, the evidence lockers they raided for profit. It's over, Hunter. The whole network is burned." "I want to see him," I said. "Oliver." "No," I said, crushing the paper cup in my hand. "Victor." Julian hesitated. "He's in a holding cell at the federal building. We're transferring him to Supermax in an hour. He's been demanding to speak to you. He says he has leverage." "He doesn't have leverage," I said. "He has delusions. But let's hear him out." The federal building was a fortress of glass and steel. Sterile. Cold. The interrogation room smelled of floor wax and stale sweat. Victor was chained to the table. He was still wearing his tactical pants, but his shirt had been stripped for evidence. He looked smaller without the uniform, without the badge, but his eyes were still burning with that same arrogant hatred. He looked up when I walked in. He smirked. "You think you won," Victor rasped. "You think because you got Oliver to squeal, you're safe." I sat down opposite him. I didn't say anything. I just placed a photo on the table. It was the picture of him and Tessa in my kitchen, the moment my marriage ended. "I know I won, Victor," I said calmly. "The question is, how much are you going to lose?" Victor leaned forward, the chains rattling. "I have friends, Hunter. Friends outside the department. Cartel connections. You think a few FBI suits are going to stop them? If I go down, a hit gets put out on you. And the retard." I didn't flinch at the slur. I didn't get angry. I just felt a profound sense of pity for him. He still thought he was playing by the rules of the street. He didn't realize I had changed the game. "Your friends," I said, pulling out my phone, "are currently busy." I slid the phone across the table. It was a news report. Breaking news. Massive drug bust in tri-state area. Anonymous tip leads DEA to cartel safe houses. Victor's face went pale. "Grant sent the tip 3 hours ago," I explained. "Using the encrypted data we pulled from your burner phone. We didn't just burn you, Victor. We burned your safety net. The cartel isn't coming to save you. In fact, they probably think you snitched to get a lighter sentence. You're a dead man walking in the yard." Victor stared at the phone. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the raw, naked fear of a predator who has just realized he is prey. "Please," he whispered. It was the first time I had ever heard him beg. "Hunter, call them off. Tell them it wasn't me. I can't go to general population. They'll kill me." "You should have thought of that before you put your hands on my son," I said. I stood up. I walked to the door. "Wait." Victor screamed, struggling against the chains. "I can give you something. Tessa. I can tell you where she hid the money. The cash from the joint account." I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. "I don't want the money," I said. "And as for Tessa, she's your problem now. You two deserve each other." I walked out. As the heavy steel door slammed shut, cutting off his screams, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying. I met Julian in the hallway. "He cracked?" Julian asked. "He broke," I corrected. "Good," Julian nodded. "Because we just got the statement from Tessa. She's trying to pin it all on him. She says she was brainwashed. She's playing the victim card hard." "Will it work?" "Not with the audio recordings you gave us," Julian smiled. "The jury is going to hear her plotting to institutionalize Evan. She's looking at 20 years, minimum. Conspiracy, fraud, child endangerment." "And Evan?" I asked. "Does he have to testify?" "No," Julian said softly. "We have enough. The video from the park, the recordings, the testimony from Oliver. Your son never has to step foot in a courtroom. He's safe, Hunter. Safe." That was the only word that mattered. I left the federal building and drove back to the house. The police tape was gone, but the house felt foreign. It was just a shell of wood and brick. The home was gone. I walked inside. It was quiet. The cameras I had hidden were still blinking in the vents, recording empty rooms. I went upstairs to Evan's room. He was sitting on the floor, packing his backpack. He had his noise-canceling headphones on, humming a soft tune. He looked up when I entered. "Are the bad men gone?" he asked. "Yeah, buddy," I said, kneeling down. "They're gone. For good." "And Mom?" The question hung in the air. I had rehearsed this answer 1,000 times in my head, but it still tasted like ash. "Mom made some bad choices," I said, honest and low. "She has to go away for a long time to learn how to be good again. She won't be coming back here." Evan processed this. He looked at his hands. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just nodded, like he had known it all along. "Okay," he said. "Can we go now?" "Go where?" "Away," he said, looking around the room. "This house is loud. Even when it's quiet, it remembers the yelling." I looked at him, amazed by his perception. He was right. The walls held the echoes of the betrayal. We couldn't heal here. "Yeah," I said, standing up. "We can go." I didn't pack much. Just clothes, Evan's toys, and the hard drive with the evidence, just in case. I left the furniture. I left the wedding photos. I left the life I had built with a woman who didn't exist. I walked out to the truck. Evan climbed into the passenger seat, clutching his Lego spaceship. I took one last look at the house. The for sale sign would go up tomorrow. The proceeds would go into a trust for Evan. I keyed the ignition. The engine roared to life. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Dominic. "The boys are heading out. We cleared the perimeter one last time. Your ghost, boss. Enjoy the peace." I put the truck in drive. The war was over. The enemy was in chains. The truth was out. But the story wasn't quite finished. Survival is one thing. Living, that's the hard part. And we had a lot of living to catch up on. We didn't just drive away, we ascended. The truck climbed higher into the Rockies, putting miles in elevation between us and the wreckage of our old life. The air got thinner, cleaner, sharper. I didn't buy a house in a subdivision. I bought 40 acres of timberland near a lake that looked like a mirror for the sky. It was raw land, untouched and honest, exactly what we needed. We spent the first few weeks living out of a camper while I poured the foundation for the cabin. Evan, who used to flinch at the sound of a toaster popping, became my foreman. He organized the nails by size. He tracked the supply deliveries on a clipboard. The chaotic noise of the city was replaced by the rhythmic sounds of construction, the saw, the hammer, the wind in the pines. One evening, about 3 months in, we were sitting by the campfire. The frame of the cabin was up, skeletal ribs against the sunset. "Dad," Evan asked, poking the fire with a stick. "Yeah, buddy. Is Mom in a cage?" I stopped whittling a piece of cedar. I had been dreading this question, but I knew I couldn't lie to him. Not anymore. "She's in a prison, Evan. It's like a timeout, but for grown-ups who break big rules. She can't hurt anyone there." He nodded slowly, watching the sparks fly up toward the stars. "Does she have Legos?" "No," I said softly. "I don't think so." He thought about that for a long time. The cruelty of her betrayal was complex, but to him, the punishment was simple. "That's sad," he whispered. "But she shouldn't have been mean." "No," I agreed, reaching over to squeeze his shoulder. "She shouldn't have." It was the first time he had shown pity for her instead of fear. That was the moment I knew he was going to be okay. He wasn't broken. He was just healing, one layer at a time. We finished the cabin before the first snow fell. It wasn't a mansion, but it was solid. Oak floors, a stone fireplace, and a room for Evan with a window that looked out over the lake. On our first night inside, I made pancakes. We ate them on the floor because our furniture hadn't arrived yet. My phone buzzed on the counter. I had changed my number, so only 3 people had it. It was a picture message from Dominic. It was a screenshot of a news article. "Disgraced officer found beaten in prison showers. Transfer request denied." Below that, another link. "Former real estate agent denied appeal. Sentence upheld." I looked at the screen, expecting to feel a rush of satisfaction. I waited for the gloating feeling, but it didn't come. Instead, I just felt. Nothing. They were ghosts to me now. Fading static in the rearview mirror. I deleted the message without replying. I didn't need updates on the villains anymore. I was too busy focusing on the hero sitting across from me, currently trying to balance a blueberry on his nose. "Hey," I said. Evan looked up, the berry falling into his lap. He laughed, a real, belly-shaking laugh that filled the empty room. "We did it," I said. "We did it," he repeated. I realized then that revenge isn't the end of the story. Revenge is just taking out the trash. The real story is what you build in the empty space left behind. We aren't hiding. We aren't running. We are just being. And for the first time in my life, that is enough. Story is finished. Author's note. That was a heavy ride, wasn't it? We walked through the fire with Hunter and Evan, and I really hope this ending gave you the peace you were looking for. I have a question for you, and I want you to be honest in the comments. If you were Hunter, could you have walked away from the final revenge on Victor in that warehouse? Or would you have pulled the trigger? It's a hard choice. Let me know what you would have done.